And go, yes. Oh, what are you forward? You can't.
A courtesy to London Studios, to those watching the world social media. We are doing this in the month of March 2025. Privilege across the year and gotten a chance to get to know you personally. And we've been here in the past, and we're here at the University of Civics. And the focus here, it doesn't matter for those watching this, if it's in the LCR field or if it's in the legal field or other fields. This is a generic experience that life has to be as long as life in addition to student. My name is Michael Biles. This is my son, Josh Biles. Josh has been in our rank over 70 years. We both are a second generation immigration lawyer. He's a third generation. Our practice was started by my late father, whose birthday he happens to be that. So I asked everybody to take a chocolate ice cream in his own. Hello. And hopefully we're not talking, right? There's two
Oh,
well, which but quite I'll read it.
I
Okay. But it raised up. But the original of the boat ain't finished. So it's a real freaking just here that so blessed with what a child to. I want to thank you for those of you that are discussing with all this health care. For installing their service that you're doing. I will do. Hopefully in the United States. It's an interesting time, and so forth. Now, for your edification, our practice is located in New York, New Jersey, Miami. We have other offices by Wagonoli. We're on 53rd Madison. Been in that building since like from the 6 o'clock. We charge project-based fee, not hourly. We generally have what's called station fee. But if you've seen this lecture, as a courtesy to Columbia University, we will give you a 15-minute consultation on that. Okay, you just have to say, so Michael's lecture, and we'll give you 15 minutes on this. Generally, I can go over our fees and the structure afterwards. We're thinking you're more efficient. And we'll use this and won't be as hard for us to consult with you. We'll do that virtual, truly be good. So, we're going to dig in now, and I'm going to ask my son to start with the first slide. So, yes. So we're going to go over the top after we got 110 over last option. We're kind of discussing what we'll end for about that spot, but that's created for solutions, especially nowadays where climate might be a little bit difficult. So in general, I'm placing this, so I'm first going quickly, but what is immigration law? Well, immigration law is the law passed by Congress and taken that did to basically upper is allowed to enter and or remain in the United States. Now, that's a very general topic, but all the rights and responsibilities that come depend on your specific case, where your thought of your criminals will start, with family members, what experiences you may have back in your home country before, but you may experience in Egypt. So a lot of examples of the different types of visas that I would get from one station to really the greatest station, which is U.S. citizenship, is starting off with the B1 visa, as you see on the slides, is for people who are visitors. That's the least that sure many of you are, which is the students. These one used is on the colloquial but peaceful, everybody's all because all these L1s which are for intra-company transferees, so you're transferred from one branch of your company across to another with your US LPR, which is their green part, and then eventually they'll grab to a citizenship in that past. They can go very sensitive to understand that the middle tier, some of the visas in the statute allow dual intent. So can you apply to your an S1?
those then called.
Yes, but they can give you a hard time when traveling in and out of America. That you said you were going to go to school, go back to your uncollected domicile, and maybe they'll apply for a green card. So we flip your wings when you travel intermittently is you're applying for permanent residence, unless you have automatic visas. And since we have here flights, potential flights for students to go from Eritrea, China, and India, and Ghana, you're looking at the panoply, all kinds of other visas that make you relevant. Some based on wonderful relations that you enjoy with your country, the ability to open up your own business. So, things in it. And that kind of leads into the next slide, where it's also about these two main categories that you're placed in. So those are nationality immigrants and the immigrant category. non-immigrants is just a fancy word for saying that you're here temporarily. So if you're here as a student, it will work. You're just here for a short period. Immigrant, on the other hand, so getting immigrant visa, you're about to get your coffee leave. And you got used to this idea of the dual intent and the presumption of an immigrant. And so anytime you present yourself as foreigner, the CBP links it, so the immigration authorities might presume that you actually have the intention of bleeding here permanently when you're only allowed to be here temporarily. Some of that kind of sounds like Serbian logic. It's a little bit confusing. But the idea is that if you're only coming for a temporary purpose, you could both have the intention of being here temporarily and not permanent. And there are certain caveats for certain visas for it allowed to have this little attention, meaning you can enter on a non-immigrant temporary visa and also apply and seek out U.S. permanent resident status in the United States at the same time. And those are really crucial for people that want to be here both to short stay and the like. So fundamentally, there are three ways of getting a status in this country. Whether you're here temporarily or permanently, that's either for a relationship, through a sponsorship, or through an investment. The presumption that Josh speaks about, it's the burden of clicking and not even bringing test. It rests with you. That's why it's important. They're very aggressive. They hold their hand, their utility belt, and they're like acting ring it out. Because there's no entitlement to entry to the United States. And you have to plead that you're telling me that's a part of it. So if you have a wedding break, you're engaged to an American citizen, it is a good classification of questions for them to start asking whether or not you are marrying a citizen if you really intend to leave it. And just because you married somebody or have a bride magazine or you cover your hair in certain religions doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stay here temporarily. Yes, that marriage is citizen, but we're going back to India where we have a family business, a hospital, or so forth. That same presumption also applies when you get to the stations, when you're filing a petition to show up at the embassy. Sometimes there's a 90-day rule where people come in as a visitor and we have them go quiet so that they don't develop another faction. If you marry somebody within 90 days of your entry to America, the government can draw that you may have a preconceived thing when you came in and get married and apply for a green card, then you committed fraud in your visitor's visa list. And these are important terms to know just from the outset, because as you're going through your own immigration journey, you be experiencing and carry a lot of these things. And like any area of law, it's the words that they use and the words that they choose are anything for it. So with that said, there's a difference between non-immigrant, immigrant. There's a difference between changing your status and adjusting your sentence. So changing your status is when you go from one non-immigrant visa classification to another. But if you're here on the S1 visa, you ultimately get selected for the H1B lottery, we get capping set out. You can change from an F1 to a H1B without leaving the United States. On the other hand, if you adjust your status, that's like going from like side thing for is like semi-immigrant category. So you're adjusting your right to future from the temporary to the long-term approach. A lot of these petitions, just to note on the bottom that says on the bottom there, a lot of petitions require sponsorship, either being an employer, a family member, but there are certain visa classification break is self-sponsored, and we'll next listen a little bit about that's very important. This individuals here who might be tip outside, why they that employer or things are not in that relationship. So you're able to change or potentially adjust in self-sponsorship, very limited circumstances. I'm going to bring through very quickly what your F1 requirements. So all your F1s and gyms.
Okay, right.
That's what I put. And your DSOs, some of the best in the country. The designated school officials that deal with ICE and service and so forth. First, you have to be enrolled in a full-time matriculated student in academic program. It's earning a certain amount of credits. Allowable time is governed by the Form I-20. You have to apply for the F1 visa that you have a U.S. administered constantly that, and prove that you have sufficient funds for tuition, maintaining your residence abroad, whether it's yours or your parents, with no intention of giving up, and you are physicians to their own country, so the government wants to see that you have significant ties. You're admitted for a duration of status at a port that you let DS gives you a special cloak and protection. We'll explain it at a later time into that session. You're given a 60-day grace period after the expiration of your I-20 and an employment authorization document that he'll shoot every that time. To maintain your status, you need to be enrolled in a minimum 12 credits ensure that your I-20 is valid at all times, keep the Office of Student Affairs in the queue before you take on jobs or you move, and obtain extensions of your permission to be before you I-20 spikes, like major gift of tax. You're required to carry your passport, your I-90 form, your I-20 with you at all times. We don't recommend it despite the requirement, because if you lose it, you're going to go into some major headaches. At least have a picture of your iPhone that 100% kosher, but half kosher is going to use this. Now, a word on the administration, just for your education, they're being very strong on immigration right now. Although the president did speak voluntarily to the notion that why are we giving foreign students green cards? He did say that. He understands the economics, that the only people that seem to win are the institutions that get your tuition money. As we educate you, we get the best American tuition, simply education. Then you return to your home countries who were competing against you in the other economy. So you understand this fundamentally, but you're going to see this schizophrenia, the duality of purpose, where the government is trying to protect Americans, and at the same time wants to protect you to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, that you're being paid prevailing wages. This schizophrenia is something that's palpable during elections, where they tend to go more in, unfortunately, in discriminatory fashion against the interests of foreign students to protect the Americans. Don't lose sight that our founding documents, our founding parents, envisioned the world that you would be playing a significant role in. You are the greatest risk takers, entrepreneurs. You are the world's best doctors and nurses and talent. We want you to eventually get a visa, get a green card, become a citizen. Now you're out. That was the vision of our founding parents. So don't let some of the bias, like discrimination in the politics, which plays significantly, sadly, in this arena of discouragement. In that respect, sevens are treating students from this very aggressively. If you fail to maintain your full-time employment, you engage in the unauthorized employment and fail to request authorization to control class, a transfer to a school without following the appropriate case, and fail to enroll by date specific, or changing your academic programs properly, they will cancel you in the service system with a consequence so significant. And most importantly, any criminal activity which jeopardizes the right to remain in the United States. You push you be smart about your relationships and how you spend your time outside of the school. If you want to travel internationally, you have to make sure your I-20 is signed by NPSL. Your signature is only valid for 6 months. If you don't have a current signature, you'll have difficulty re-entering the United States. You should visit the Office of Student Affairs and get a passport, a valid F1 stamp, make sure it's valid. The stamp just gets you in. You don't need to have it current at the time we're here. I do this weeks before you travel. Make sure your passport is also valid for more than 6 months beyond the day you plan to re-enter. And 10 out of enter America with an F1 using a passport that has less than 6 months of validity until it. So you're traveling with an F1 stamp and need a valid passport, a U.S. visa stamp, a signature from the I-20. If you even travel within America, you're required to have all of these documents. You have one rights on it, the I-94 card. Driving licenses, you can get one, but your student criminal tax returns are required. It's a fine AS4 slate. Even if you're not making money, you're still required to file a tax return. There are 2 kinds of work authorization as students. And yes, so CPT, curricular practical training, is the first one that we're going to mention. That's granted by your DSO, and then we'll be mentioning DSO. It's really important that it's going to make a decision for anything that might change this stage. But like, that you speak to your DSO, but not treat them virtually. So that's just a no. But your CPT is strategy of mild during the year. As opposed to OPT, which we'll get into in the next slide, optional practical training, which is post-graduation. So CPT is generally limited to 20 hours a week while the school is in session, and 48 hours a week while the school is on holiday and grace. The real important thing to note here is that white OPT, CPT, custody relating to your dealing with the site. So when you're studying up at Cal, You must be working in public. If somebody in business, you must decide that you must be working in some business capacity. But again, your DSO is the one who will authorize you to that job. You cannot do any authorization outside PlusMap. The other important thing to know about CPTs is that if you use too much of it, you will lose your OPT. So if you use the orders following those to CPT, you will not get OPT, which is your post-graduation right to work. There are certain exceptions for economic necessity, but those are really granted, particularly administration. When you apply for one visa, the government wants to see that you have the funds to pay your tuition. I'm sure you guys know about this. Pay the tuition if you're experts enter in or so if you're playing economic necessity after their input your status jeopardy, what really is you speak to over about that. The trick is the kid girl, the CPT devs go out and bounce and like stuff. Then you can still use it for uncontrolled. See, explain, Josh. I don't. I just I'm not. The CPT doesn't have to be consistent. Doesn't have to be 12 months or 11 months in a row. You can do an internship for 3 months here, an internship for 3 months there. But the minute you cumulatively use 12 months, that's what doing Scopies. So OPT, optional practical training is post-graduation blanket. We generally get 12 months per descending degree. So if you get your bachelor's here in the United States, you'll get 12 months of OPT. Then if you go for a master's, you'll get another 12 months. If you go for 2 master's degrees, so 2 degrees on the same level, you will not get a new OPT. That has to be an ascending degree. You have to obtain your EAD before you're able to work. And as an EAD, it's your employment authorization document. If you're a DSO or an immigration lawyer to help you apply for that, get it by filling out those called I-765. If you haven't done that already, don't with it. If you are a STEM student, which are really likely on the next slide, or look at that moment, but if you're studying science, technology, engineering, or math, you'll actually get an additional 2 years of OPT. So you get 3 years of work authorization after your master's. There is also, the medicine data processing is now available to get your EAD quicker. So it used to take a while, people with me to work, employers see to that because they see it as helping you out for the news opportunity at work. You kind of data process your EAD, data processing piece, you'll get a decision much quicker. Government will have either issue to you or guide or request some sort of evidence, they'll have to do something real fast. So when you are applying for EAD, the timelines, at that time, we'll process and time drops the government, I would kindly recommend consider video process. You won't feel to extend the preview if you're married or not, so there's totally was that. So to maintain your status and what we do, all students have reporting requirements, every 10 days of any change of your day. You vary, you say talk about a name or residential address and put a flag PR11. You have to tell your DSO and you have to go online to fill out PR11. The internet address of your employer and the interruption of employers. Fundamentally, you may not accrue any aggregate more than 90 days of unemployment during a 1 year OPT. You don't have to be paid during OPT. So if you volunteer, if you're a physician and you go and you volunteer someplace, you may only get proof that you've done it, so you have to interrupt that part. For F1 step regulations and getting anyway in those fields, we'll get 3 shots at the H-1B. You get the OPT plus 2 extensions. For those physicians here, it's kind of a world thing. I've been EMT in the state of the door for about 35 years. We get a shot. We show up, we put a band in it. It relieves proof. The government will then put another band in the dome. They'll tell you. Then another band. We don't do surgery. We triage and we back things from people. It's the same thing with the H-1. They created this H-1B work visa that you can only apply in a certain regimen type. So instead of fixing it the racial law for everybody, particularly science, technology, engineering, and math students or talents, they didn't change it. They just give you a clause. You put 1 clause on, 2 clause on, 3. That's it. You get 3 clauses and then 3 shots of the H-1B. It's not fair, but the student also has to have at least a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctoral degree in STEM. The employer has to be registered with the E-Verify system. There's still one system that can verify either the person's authorized and what. Students should get social security numbers. It never changes. And we keep current don't ease a little. This is a hot topic. we're still not into the terms of what life is like after F1, but I just want to make sure that the foundation of your F1 is good. One of the hot topics is both CAF gap, fundamentally work visas like the H-1B, specifically is only due October 1. The fiscal year for the government begins October 1, not January 1. You're allowed to apply for visa that generates 6 months from jail. So what if your employment authorization document expired at a certain date? What is the law for a student that runs a manual? Well, you have our worker inside the league that you're doing yourself petition. 60. You have a 60-day grace guilty give bail and confessor for business and immigration law, so I get people can talk. So you have a 60-day grace period. So if the work authorization expires 6 months by waiting for October 1 and paper, so you could apply for an H-1B visa every year at April 1. Right. What if your employment authorization document expires in February? You have a 16-day grace period that allows you to be here. This is where the CAF gap rules kick in. What's CAP? There's a 65,000 cap to all H-1Bs, plus an additional 20,000 if you have a master's from the U.S. Institute, of which you would qualify coming here on the university. So the CAP gap still does that CAP gap rule. What does that mean? A student holds OPT at the time the H-1B is filed prior to October 1 is entitled to automatic extension of status and work authorization through October 1 if the H-1B petition is filed and accepted with request for a change of status. So you go from an S1 to an H1, no issues. If the student are held OPT, which expired less than 60 days prior to the H1, they're entitled to automatic extension of status annually until October 1 if the H-1B was filed and accepted, and so forth. If your OPT expires more than 60 days, let's say your OPT expires in January, and unfortunately, the student is not eligible for gap, just called release. Don't do this at home. People put you to sleep. Call me at my office. My phone number, my cell phone, those got you to the segment is 347-203-6355, which is 347-203-6355. We will give you a quick answer on the house as to whether or not you have to worry about tap gapping where it's all. You get your EAD, call us, and we'll advise you. Now we're going to jump into some relevant other visas. This is life after the F1. You've done invested, you put it behind you, as somebody would say, now what are we going to do? Josh, what did you get somebody to leave? Yeah, so just a very quick overview before we get this, the nuances of them. The H-1B, a lot of you are probably familiar with. We get asked a colloquial art visa, like we hear about. This for people who are working in a specialty occupation. The TN visa, get into the nuances of that, but specifically basically trade after it, as they put people for messing up your business. The E3, if you're Australian, the J1, if you're a state visitor, it's immediate, it's your, then that's an O1 if you took some trade that were starting a quality here too. So that's it, because in federal terms, but like any other area, all have very specific requirements, and you need to prove that you meet those eligibility requirements, otherwise you won't get visas. Okay, cool. So each one of these things we give you from the Dutch one. It's just a bit shit one. This is not the most quality visa in the world. It's basically for a person that is bachelor's degree in a fall. I'm saying, how many people really have the bachelor's degrees? Well, 2 years behind them. Most of you are physicians in your own country, came to Columbia, became a master's or a business other pursuit, right? Well, you could have done an H-1B a few years ago. Each year, it's just throwing an H. And by the way, we didn't know we designed strategies for our clients where if they're eligible and you can find a sponsor, you can enroll in the lottery each year. It starts this week, March 7, 3 days from now. You enroll in this lottery, you get the H1 selected, you then apply in April, so you give it approved, so you don't start October. You just leave it dormant, so you don't change your status in one vacation. You finish up your F1, use your OPTs. You have 6 years to use your H1. It's a shame that we didn't meet forward, but every year you should be applied for an H1. For those watching the video, the politics, this news burst right now, if we actually have a line lost the thing, for the safety of the H-1B visa program, because with some of the people the president put in place that would demolish you. Musk is an issue, if you would, of the H-1B visa program. And so what's an H-1B? It's a professional with at least master's degree in a particular field. There is a experiential component, so that for every 1 year of college at UBC, you can show 3 years experience and get the equivalent of an academic year. So we have clients, by the way, in the whole sense of vocations and professions that have at least 12 years work experience, and we get them evaluated, and they get the equivalent of the bachelor's degree. The U.S. company must offer you a prevailing wage. This is where things go weird. Clients of ours on Zeta, they treat the person like gold because they'll be paid a minimum wage or a lower wage when you're an OPT. But the minute you are going to petition for somebody, they have to pay you a prevailing wage. Now, if you go online to our website, that our social media, I have workshops where I teach students how to develop their voice. When you ask an employer to sponsor you, how you ask you, what they're allowed to ask you, and what they're not allowed to ask you. On the one hand, it's good to have a job, it's good to build a resume, but that I can help you get to the promised land where they sponsor you for an age. It'll be an issue. The position also must be directly related to foreign national field and study. If you have a degree in environmental sciences, can you work in the stock market on tech? Absolutely, you can. But the science is a major component of the work that you're doing. I had a physician that was going to be sponsored, and this gentleman owned a lot of restaurants. We ended up having her sponsored for an H-1B as calorie counter because of the science of her technology experience and so forth. So we have the capability of extrapolating, although these are not lawyers to location, so John put some creativity behind this. The H-1B basically allows you the same up to 6 years. If by year 5 you filed a great card and it's going to be for a whole year, it can extend your H-1 a year at a time until you've completed. In fact, we could get to the petition part of it during the labor supervision break card, you can get 3-year extension until your break card is issued. Again, for the 65,000 H-1Bs, the regular cap is 20,000 for U.S. passengers as well. Only about a fifth of the cases found were selected. We know we need to finance people into the lottery. If you get selected, great. If you put in more than one selection on something else, it's judged by your day. 5,200% second Chile at Singapore. Again, the additional gap of 20%, 20,000 is for U.S. master degree. And almost 50% of the lottery users this year had a U.S. master degree. So a lot of people, when they run in the flame way, like the perks, can't do it. Where they have to maintain their status by going for a higher degree. There are some employers that are exempt from the H-1B tax. Institutions of higher education, for example, ITs at Cornell Law School and Fifth Avenue for Dean Street. They bring an adjunct professor in. They can do those adjunct apprenticeship on an H-1B cap exempt basis. Also, non-profit organizations affiliated with institutions of higher education, government research organizations, to be filed at any time of the year. To go from a cap exempt employer to a cap subject, one has to go through the lottery. There's no two back doors into getting it. And the H-1B visa is a black star piece. The one that allows you up to 6 years and 3 years. Number 2, it's got a point-of-landing clause. You can go from one employer to the next. It enables you to take an H-1, and upon the filing with immigration, that H-1B generally is 2-step, one with the Labor Department and then immigration. When the immigration gets their petition, you FedEx the person who on board on the payroll is a used company while the case is ending. They take that receipt and the I-9 purposes to show that you're plates. Now, I happen to be a mayor in New Jersey where I live. I live in New Jersey right over the bridge. It took us all 9 minutes to get it. So I have a full-time job as a lawyer and I have a part-time job as a maid. If you operate bracket houses, then you can have two full-time jobs if they're crazy. You can have the full-time and a part-time if you're crazy like me. Or you can have two part-time jobs. By the way, we do advise our clients all the time. If we feel that they're going to be fired or quit, give yourself a part-time job. You're allowed to have concurrent visas. You can take a visa, get them approved and bank it. But to have a active visa, you can only have one. You can have, actually, you can have one, but they all have to be, you got several of that lot. Can't hold two active visas at the same time. So what does that mean? You're with job A, you're miserable, so you find somebody will do a part-time visa for part B. When you know you're happy there, you wait till they can find from job A, you're allowed to still be. But that's a smart way of maintaining the presidency. H-1B also, you want star visa because it permits a dual intent. The person can intend to immigrate to America and older H-1B. They too, if getting grade 20 to apply for a main part. If you're terminated by your H-1B, there's a 60-day grace period that applies during which time they either find a new employer, apply to change status or depart to the United States, changing status to a B2, which is a busy pleasure, is adopted to tie up use ends. The employer is responsible to return your transportation to your own country if you didn't use the port and village employers. And so let's just review the key dates. This year's lottery entry, noon on March 7th, through doing on March 24th. You gotta be in it to win it. If you don't enroll yourself, it's a problem. The selection investigation will be done and dusted by March 31. The H-1B petition must be filed will launch June 30. So people want till June 30. On January 1 is the start of the government fiscal year at the beginning of the cap subject H-1B petition. April 1 is the earliest filing deadline with an October start date. Be mindful again, that's the major metrics in this bit. The expiration date of your OPT, so long as your OPT is valid past April 1, on your cap gap, you continue to work beyond the expiration, provided your H-1B was select. So, Josh, you want to go to that just spares what makes something you guys would expect when it's from your can child, so in the next few weeks or months, the big part, the private employers are free to ask you certain questions, and they're not allowed to ask you other questions. You can be expected to be asked about your authorization to work in the U.S. It's fully not that to say you're authorized to work here. You should expect that and have an answer prepared. Generally, in our experience, they want to see that the person is prepared. So if you just say yes, as the yes, and I've studied this, and I'm well knowledgeable for this, I'm in the university or that, and I'll be with this, and my DSO phone is, if they know you're prepared, then they can walk those to process. That's not what piece of advice we get. Do not shy away from it. If you cannot fight, then you might keep work authorization. So it's better just to be upfront about it, be open and honest, but show them next year, because someone who's never thought this work, well, I know that you're going to make these two. So other questions they can ask you is after employment, after your employment, then you consider persons in according to U.S. citizenship, or your rights related to the U.S. This is their the I-9 process. Rather than really think that too much is that they, but for compliance purposes, you will have to show your authorization to work in the U.S. If you have any specific questions about that, you should ask your official at that time. This will get a little bit dicey, but generally you just fill in your employment authorization document, your ask about all that stuff. And they can ask about any language abilities. I'll be helpful in English. It's kind of a sneaky way people try to figure out what your situation is. But beyond that, they really shouldn't be asking the IT person. This next slide is a little bit more about discrimination. If you see, I have to look at something too much because this is a very nuanced area that feels more labor exploited. But if you feel that you have been discriminated against in the interviewing process, I'm recommending us for employment and labor deployment lawyer. It can be very, very basic, just something you want to avoid altogether. But if you do experience it, if you are sorry if it's unlucky to have to go through something like that, and there are some bad actors out there, but just know that probably there's going to be such stuff. What check the employer asks, like passing the on this, but they said asking in terminated foreign or natural citizen, the flag asking your birthplace, sometimes they'll say, oh, where are you from, my citizen accent, and they can't say where are you born. Some people might not know these rules. You might hear it anyways, but generally they're not supposed to ask that. I'm not supposed to ask them if your parents or grandparents, when you came to the U.S., like a first language, they ask you if you speak any other languages, but they shouldn't ask what your native tongue is first, and not asking that prior. And again, it's being honest, look at the concept before you appreciate it. You should know what you're talking about. If you go in there and you don't know anything, so they don't know anything either, you're just gonna, you shoot yourself in the foot. People get you like that also candidates if you've already having action plus. So we already telling, yes, I need an H1B, but I have still OBT in the next 20 years. Private H1Bs every single year. You have 3 bites at the apple. You have a 20% advance every year. If you have a master's, odds of you getting it are pretty high. Statistically, it's a little bit gray area, but more odds we are like that. Just interesting. And just know about what their discomforts are. Maybe do a little research. The company sees you on any spot to sit before into the unrolled dipping or not. But again, this will all depend on you are exactly where you're applying for jobs. Then money matters. He said you have to, that his lawyer has to pay for the petition, but there are other fees that is more of a gray area than you can pay. So a lot of times our clients will fall for it to pay for those fees so that it saves the company certain dollars so that they feel more comfortable doing this. Again, you'll deal with that if you're one selected, like I would create more or anything like that. They should go over to what the fees are, and sure you're allowed if the employer has to pay it, because that will save the employer big head. And finally, to increase your chances, there's really no way to do it. They used to allow you to be multiplied system of first, but they cracked down on that, and now it's time to go ask for. Head to your name, so you can really only get one quick. They don't provide this, but it's always a great visa. It's how like Grass 5 or visas. A lot of you apply for Big Park. And when you say lottery, it's the middle of your lottery. It's like literally about, it's either going to be yes or it's going to be no. 10 visas. You go over it in what the employer's intent is, you have to code. So the H1B visa, as John said, is really a lot of visa. Like, give you some other reasons that are looking in that. We have a life lanes that present themselves in very sophisticated professions and visas, and then when you know lots of permanent residents, we try to get them into the H1. Sometimes we will get inches and bank them, and they run out of runway, we pivot to it. It's critical. There are travel restrictions that keep in all the time when you're applying to permanent residents. The H1B is not bound by it. It's a nuance in the law. When they apply for permanent resident, the H1B is allowed to travel pivot. The H1B is getting kickbacks now and resistance from immigration. The issue was called RFPs, request for further evidence. It's a specialty occupation. They'll push back and say, please explain why a bachelor's degree is required in this field. For physicians, for lawyers, for engineers, for accountants, they'll never have that resist, but they know that that's a profession. Generally, but when they do some of the opiate stuff, like I said, calorie counselings and things like that, they may push back on making sure that that's there. Be knowledgeable about the process. Be mindful about the different parts of it. Again, the H1B is a 2-step process. First in the labor department, and then it's immigration. The labor has a little politics to it. Actually, what they do is they require employers to post in the place of business what the salary is and that this job account. Why do you think they do that? What have they been trying to do it? Why they post it? Yeah, they figure they put it up in a kitchen or in a bulletin board, and if the American goes by and they'll see it, this is where you see that schizophrenia. Is the government protecting an American to get your job, or are they protecting you by making sure they be paid a prevailing wage? That they're both. I want you to understand, fundamentally, America wants to get the best talent, the American companies. And that best talent, they be packaged in an F1. And then that F1 eventually becomes an H1 that brings originalism and so forth. But understand that duality of purpose. We got to block things. Understand that duality of purpose, that the authorities are looking here to get the best and talent possible. Your employer to not discriminate against you. Make sure that if you become employers in the future, let's keep sensitive in how you talk to people, because sometimes it could be uncomfortable for them as well. And like Josh said, make sure you volunteer at an early stage. The job may look good on your resume, or when it comes down to it, but it actually help you in the next stage. We may want to go there as one. So some of the other mark pieces, anybody in the audience here are Canadian?
Canadian left.
Okay, so if you're a language immigrant in Canada, that's just Canadian permanent resident, exactly Canadian national citizen. So for those watching this, the TN visa is Canadians in Mexico, some like die American Canada and Mexico, where you could have passed the Gulf to Mexico, it's now called the Gulf of America. We'll see it calling years time of the States, but line here, his TN visas of the Western Hemisphere, the United States, and Canada, and Mexico, it's limited to specific occupations listed on DAFTA. You need to have the educational credentials for it. Do not let that rule intent. Canadian nationals do not need visas. Mexican nationals need a visa. There is a discrimination settled in the way immigration law is impacted and demonstrated. And that's what's unfortunate. Although there's no statutory limitation how many times the game can be rid of, I think you will eventually deny for immigrant and say 50 years ago TN. If you get an TN, you still want to go for an H1. Next. But actually, if it's an I2 visa, so this is specific to other countries as well, but there's so like this spot there that just like it's an entire list and must be a national of that country, where the corporation must be owned by nationals of that country. This is not a caveat necessary, though. It's also the E1, which is for highly service visa for selling products and doing trade. That's the trader visa. But the investment visa is a little bit more popular. If you want to open up a business in the United States to apply an existing business, and you're willing to make a substantial investment, and you're willing to put an investment at risk, meaning you actually put it into the company, they can be eligible for this E2 visa. My father always says this, and I don't like it as like it's like smelling the pasta. If somebody opens up a restaurant, they want to see that it's legitimately at risk. If you open up the restaurant, they hire waiters. Where are you buying the cheese roll? Where are you buying this sauce? Like, these are like, what you do that was there. But I teach that I hit my nose. Government, the thesis of the E2 is they're starting a business. They get to employ Americans, but they want to see the revenue and the success. They get to smell the cheese. And every country gets this visa for different amounts of time. There's different reciprocity rules and permanent states outside. A lot of it is legal. Some people will get it for 2 years, some pay actual event for 4 or 5. But you can redo it so long as you can show that the business is still not there from all its operating, maybe not at the profit, but bringing a substantial revenue, hiring you as workers. They've also boost the economy through this visa. So for individuals here, you might be part of those treaty treaties, and you have the funds to do it. You don't have any fund the employers and up on the job anywhere else. You want to stay in the United States and last pulling up your shop. Doing B2 is a very good option. We give us to get that do that. But you actually have to have the funds and they will trace the source of jobs. So they're not to see you got the money as a gift, but we'll see you get if you open up your own emerging location, this will qualify. Or if something already opened one up and then registered for an E, if you're in the same nationality as the owner, they can become an essential worker and going to their shop. The only works if we have a treaty that there's revenue being made. Now, just because you're physicians and nurses doesn't necessarily mean you can't go out this way, or your spouse. When we have clients and they're married, we like to meet with both parties, particularly for the E. The H-1 visa does not allow these spouses to work unless there's a certain restriction. Certain exceptions. The E2 allows us out to work. So if you're a nurse and a doctor, you're looking for work position, and your spouse wants to open up a hookah bar, a pizzeria or something, that's the best scenario because he or she can get that visa, and then you're the end of that law piece is generic that allows you to work anybody. So we become detectives when we meet with our clients, when we individually soon. Tell us about the E3. No as Australian, I would say, correct. So the E3 is particular for Australians, T is particular for Canadians, Mexicans, so this very looking it's kind of like a niche white B for Australians. You have to show that it's a specialty occupation, have correct degrees, field, The only caveat that's supposed to HLP is not legitimate type B cell. So like the TN and the 4-to-do more likely you're going to symptomize. It's more band name, so people will start on E3s or TS, then want to move over to H1B. It's similar comment, so if you're working as the spouse and so on, it's E2. You might want to start doing your own H1B also is to everything back. So you're not relying on skull travel or visit. This ability with the E3, there's no statutory limitation, but again, the ability the integrated set. And if you're Australian, just reach out, they will talk about the specifics that choose the J Wilson. A lot of you are restricted doing J's since you're like F1 and you're already F1 VT after practical training. The J fundamentally is just a list later trainees and interns, but it means and that a lot of the reuse in medical profession is I may not be relevant to you or listen to all at once, but tell us a few words. So again, I'll just cut very quickly. There's multiple paths for J1s, so their program, the main program that people use focus on are the trainees and unit studies. For the J1 trainee, you probably get up to 18 months. You must have obtained your core degree 1 year of experience for 5 years of experience. With the J1, let's mention you're working with the Department of State authorized agencies. So you have these agencies that work directly to companies to create these training programs. So they're very particular. There's no way to get around that. There's a fair requirements. The sort of take on them, which is another here's just a lot of you guys on F1s are subject to PCT and eventually OBT and hopefully that he's going to make. But very quickly again, it's for 12 months as opposed to 18. You must have obtained your foreign degrees in the last 12 months. Now, based on reciprocity rule, there must be some cultural component to it. So you must show that you're close to yourself, the American culture to your respect. The caveat about J1s that everybody should know about is that they do have a 2-year foreign residency requirement. That means that you cannot change the under visas, limited exceptions, and you cannot adjust that to get green card without going only for at least 2 years. There are ways to get rid of that and to waive the requirement, but those are very exceptional circumstances. But you cannot obtain the age get in and out. There's a nuance of homes. But it's very careful, and it's very difficult for medical students, so specifically physicians on day ones. So I'm going to put all physicians here, and what if you probably most of the general program if you did. There's certain ways to able to read us some. But we're not the LVs. You should link. Sure, the L1, I mentioned this earlier, it's an instruct of me transferring. It is good and applicable here because you can't get a job in the US. We often advise people to go abroad, work for a year, and then come back in because this creates after you get it. So we need a parent, subsidiary, affiliate, or some sort of joint venture between a company abroad and a company here in the United States. We must be working there for at least 1 year within the last 3 years, and you must be in some sort of executive or managerial aspect, their L1A, or you have some sort of specified knowledge within the company for L1B. The L1A is for 7 years, the L1B is for 5 years, and it's a really good idea for people who do not let anything be louder. They max out their OPT, and they find a job at a company here that is also as an affiliate for a grants abroad. You meet for a year, you work there, then you come back in. So long as you show your managing garage since they're a function, ballpark keep it. Yeah, you have a roll abroad for 365 days. So you come back into the pizza like 6, you may have to 7. That's 1 year period of time. The next visa is the low visa. This is for regions and extraordinary ability. It's out. You can't be a legend in your own life. You really have to be important in your space. This is again the sciences, art, business, education, and others. We could give a visa up to 3 years. We could give for a week. We do it from performance. We do it from distinguished clerics, imams, rabbis, priests. We do it for tattoo artists. From Mrs. Trump's sister, we did a whole visa to John George, the chef, the boy George, the singer. We've done this for a lot of physicians and people who have written that book, treatises and so forth. Initially, it's valid for 3 years. We extended indefinitely. Generally, people it's over a year or like 3 years. If it's a new gig, if the price and advisor opinion from the pamphlet, then your achievements in the field of endeavor and the nature of the enthusiasts are the candidates. Again, you have to prove generally you qualify either out of 6 or 8 standards. You have to hit 3. We could have the same kind of part-time job offer from the single employer, or you could have an agent-based application where you could get deal memos from several people and then be your own gentleman or tell a lady where you're freelance. So if a company wants to sponsor you, you can do it, but then what if you get tired of the company or just find other gigs on the side? That's why we introduced an agent with a contract with you, a contract with deal memos from some of the places that you work, and then we present the whole one from that agent. The deal memos should memorialize what's intention, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do all of that work or to even do that work. It can subject to change. And generally we have a admonition in the application saying, look, these are the deal memos you have. We expect a lot more in the next 3 years. Can you have the general authority to pivot and work in that space through that third party? In order to be a person who's qualified for it, so, you know, if you get a Grammy, an Emmy, you're a Miss Universe, you have a Nobel Peace Prize, those are obviously easy ways of doing it. But generally, we ask our clients to provide us to the CV, their resume, we're looking at press, any reviews or media coverage you have, any awards, conferences that you spoke at, both the layers eventually asking you to talk, copy of what you did, and the reviews of what you did. Exhibitions, if your work is ever been exhibited, for tear sheets, magazines, you want the cover or you wanted the professionals in small photo in the magazine, evidence of any high compensation. So if you're being paid more than others, that in of itself is a very low tier. You show the pay scales and so forth. We draft anywhere between 5 and 10 support letters, probably between discrete leaders, and we take their Wikipedia pages or other proofs to show them that they know what they're describing and talking about with you. Generally, on 01 to timing, we can move them very quickly. They can get the government $2,800, and they will then expedite and premium process the case within 15 business days. They use it in calendar days that they know assess and adjudication. Just because you get it domestically get America approved, this would be like the embassy or white. We have this happen to a very important violinist. We went back to the embassy in Sweden, and they asked the violinist, "Are you going Allah?" She goes, "No," and we denied your whole visa. The hell of the standard that was even high. We could push back, can litigate if it's a domestic filing at the American embassy. That's the wild it was, different culture. Here, the O2 supports the O1. What does that mean? That a person who is in the creative and the athletics, you have somebody supporting them. And so we had Kenny Kissick. He was like 14 years old when he started getting pole musician. His mother was his one of those specialists. He was, again, a performer in the creative athletics. We represented Pelé, Sakurai of the generation, Brazil. Anybody who was in social media or other people could go in as a supporting cast member. The dependent for the old is the old three. They can apply directly at the embassy. They're not given permission for work, and again, the O2 would only work for the old one. There are many times where we have tell a person to hang up your shingle on the tail of somebody else, supporting all one, develop your same reputation and pride, and then what we like to do is to change the status later can own to Sulukola. Just wanted to add, since supposed to draw students here, it's very difficult to get one African student because after you meet extraordinary you to study it. But particularly in your field, there are certain categories where if you're writing, you're altering, studying pieces, and if you're speaking about panels, there goes with events and things like that, you can do that as a student, and you can use both of that in the application. So sometimes people will go to F1s to O1s, or later in life, they'll be able to get an F1 based on things they did as a student. So don't shy away from anything while you're in school. You have an opportunity to write for a hotel, or to shower somebody in the hospital, or do whatever they need. Do it, because it will up in the future, and keep proof of it, because you might lose that invitation, you might lose that email, you might lose those pictures. Keep a folder somewhere in that all the files in my work folder if you want. But we do have a lot of people in the public hospital that will eventually get O1s based on things that they did as a student. So don't shy away from anything. It will help you split their outfits and see what you're there. And before just joining their practice, he worked for like federal government, helping judge by opinions on conjugal applications that were to perform immigration laws. I had the privilege of being a federal prosecutor and actually reporting penalty. As the next line shows, you violate your status by invading America beyond its guarded time. There is all the nuance on the way with the DS. I said I would get back to this. Students during mini-completion of status do not get free on all basics. What does that mean? If a person comes to America, overstays a visa for 6 months, they are subject to a 3-year bar. If you come to America, you overstay for a year. During the 65 days, you're subject to a 10-year bar. This was written into law by President Clinton for 1996 on an often conservative and tough on immigration. That was that was in 96. When he left office in 2000, he threw going to the Queen and realized we had created. A few months later, 9/11 happened when the laws ever changed. So the 3 and 10-year bar still sitting in the books. The foreign students were admitted to DS without a parole to presence. It could be here 12 years as it overstays an F1, and you can still go back to your old American embassy, your old country, and apply for a visa. And that was unlikely enough they're going to show you hospitality, Italian to you. They may done to you for other reasons, but it's an important feature. What does that mean? 2 things. Number one, if you change status from the F1 to another status, you lost that insulation in the DS. So if you're just trying to get a 6-month visa to stay here and wipe down your affairs by changing from an F1 to a B2, you lost that protection of the DS. It's not worth. Number 2, if you get a case denied, once there's an adverse denied, that also breaks the DS. There's a DS that's gone back and forth. It's been litigated, but it's an important feature for those humanists that may fall out of step with their immigration status. You want to consult with a lawyer if you shows if you don't give it up if the needs it. Now, the test of getting green cards is Balkan test. And generally the easiest status through family preferences. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you have your citizen children, you can use as a parents, siblings, for example, permanent residents. You see, there might be a path for you to get a status here. A lot of it all depends on the visa quotas, backlogs, and specifically which residents are going through. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but basically if you do have a relationship with someone who's a U.S. citizen or awful pretty as husband, there might be a chance you get status based on that. If you're sibling within your 15 to 20 years, so if you're a spouse U.S. citizen, we can get it pretty much immediately, and I'll take about a year. That's what I'm sitting right now. But if you do have that relationship, it's worth pursuing. The second way is here's so good. Don't accelerate a relationship unless it's real. Okay, you get mother-in-laws and all the other stuff that comes with it. You have to be very sensitive to the notion that it's a saint. It's a very special, sacred experience, clean carries and everything. And you have to know for the right reasons. The government will judge you if they figure out that you did this become a division. We certainly don't want. Yeah, and you have to prove the legitimacy of the marriage based on third-party police or relationship. Healthcare companies say, I love him, I'm a third, even under this. They want to see what other people know about this show. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're high well for these last show. Okay? So there's so many benefits on sponsors who are employer, and also that dual accepting really comes to place, getting H1B. And they also want to be they want you to be long-term. They just sponsor you for things for immediately, and you're able to stay on that H1B until you get that green card. There's also ways to self-sponsor yourself for green card and compared to your circumstances. Those are major investments in the United States. That's the EB-5 program. A lot of people probably saw the news about this in Bullet Park program, where you get for $5 million. Other outlets, because it has the authority to actually get collected, is up in the air. You probably will need an act Congress, but that's now there is a way to get the green card based on that. That's during the EB-5. And then finally, additional methods care a little bit more marketers that changes humanitarian purposes. So if you're applying for asylum, or you're a refugee, or you've been battered by a spouse or a parent or So the diversity visa lottery program was to get status as well. So 5 preferences. If you want, if employment-based first preference of people who are extraordinary, the multinational is a traveling over. EV2 are people who are doing things in the nation's interest. Here at the university, if you end up inventing a vaccine, like doing something that's fundamental to our national interest, or participating in it, it's something that we would throw it out. Exceptional ability as opposed to extraordinary ability. The third and fourth preference are like certifications with influence candidates, like so in a conventional case of a labor department designated with walls with an employer and running ads in the newspaper to make sure that you give Americans a shot to get the job. The fourth preference are religious memories, long-term UA officials, and family spouses of U.S. citizens. And the fifth is the EB5, where you can literally buy a green card, and the president can give you a gold card has yet been practiced and ferreted out. The question is, do you need to work with the person who sponsors you? We're seeing now pushback when people apply to citizenship. And you got a green card to an employer, they didn't want to know how long you would stay there. Or if you didn't stay there, you're allowed to leave. The law allows you to leave after certain stages of green card cases and stay in the industry and not stay with the employer. Make sure you make good, wise choices when you do this. There was a time which is a labor certification that available laws where you're looking for ready, able, and willing workers. In fact, you convince your employer to do this. It takes years and the quotas back up, particularly for China, India, things countries like this as well. Once you have a green card, 5 years later, you can apply for citizenship, or if you're married to an American citizen, we can do it after 3 years. Golden Grail is becoming a U.S. passport holder. Can't be reporting from the United States, can have a green card. There's always a chance. Our good office represents the likes of Bill Baldwin of Atlantic, John Lennox, Wynn. She and his public record never applied for citizenship because she would lose face in Japan that lose, I guess, these that. Medicine requirements like that, it's so important that you become a American citizen. So many good people sold it because of circumstances beyond their control. Being a citizen also gives you greater privilege, voting, and so forth. Just a couple of good websites are here. This PowerPoint's available, and everybody watching it, you also reach out to us if you need to work in practice like that and the rest of the soul. Whose birthday is today? Starting this for 1960, the brochure that you have shows the building where I'm thinking in Madison. In 1971, a famous center Beatle rolled into our lives, John Lennon. And you can see him in Dreamer, and I'm not the only one of that. One John and Yoko agreed for it's the 5-year battle with the Nixon administration when they tried to deport the famous Beatle. The only critic is a doctor in that case, it is taught in law school by me and a lot of other professors as the Lennon doctrine, where they saw the underpinnings of the prosecutorial discretion. Dad had no idea who John was and was the exemplar of the best what this profession shows. That is somebody when we work hard and you don't go with a legacy. There are a million people here, but for the grace of their parents and an act of God, they were born into this country and now out of remedy because of this delay. But you'll see that we represent President Trump. Some of the presidents, Obama and Clinton, but some of them have the others in there. But I represent the president's self-interest, suitability, interests, and Arnold and Mr. Trump, and his family is way close to the First Lady's sister. We got a three-part of citizenship. The president was scaring people in his first term about chain migration. Josh and I walked the parents in to get citizenship. A bedrock of immigration policy, long truth, is actually being able to reunify their family. You'll work harder, you'll love harder. Now, I'm going to say this, and I said that don't be intimidated by the toughness on television. You're all instant it. The president himself artfully articulated that he felt that people that are working hard here should get green cards. Why would we compete against them in another economy? It makes perfect sense. The problem is there are kids that are now running these decisions. And we have to outlive this, and we have to use art to jump the kind of Moxley and don't keep yourself. My director is for Holocaust thousands, and I consider myself a product of Indians. We have to double down and make sure that this Indian experiment we call America is done right. It's done right. It's amazing, pretty, this photo. So to those watching this and those that are here today, we tip our hat to you because you are a future, you are what was envisioned in our past. So we hope that you'll select our practice. We can help you typically. Consultation fees are $500 to flower this senior lawyer. I charge $700. We credit the consultation fee to the case, so you're not impacted by it. Any student from Columbia University that sees this can come to us for a 16-minute lecture, or we do go generally by Zoom without fee. That's courtesy, and we'll give you a sliding scale. We'll make these work for you what you can understand. We're not in it just for the market. As you can tell, we got paid to win these elections and then do the whole of the race. To our privilege, we are so proud as we memorialize your father today, that his grandson made one of those presentations. I hope your life will do what he's doing, that is made forward in the next generation, that this country that's, this discuss. Any questions? Any questions or count?
Yeah, well, I heard a lot about how the last next week after that students they should that will have pause because it was one to the student again. I just want to like you on that and what is the issue?
So every year, Mr. Dugans want to be lottery. They trace in Garshi on that. It's Garshi selected, and so they haven't done this year's lottery yet. It's going to start in a couple of days on March 7th. It's called Intelligent March 4th. Submitting all 65,000